welcome to the program. This is your host, Greg Fenton. Each week, we'll explore topics and ideas related to the experience of people with conflict and look to promote the profession of conflict resolvers. We are available to connect with by email at fentonmediation@gmail.com or by calling 647-227-4734. Visit us at our Facebook page to like us and Facebook group page to ask to become a member. Also visit YouTube channel Fenton Mediation to see videos of past shows. Listen to podcasts of Mediation Station on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Please follow us at our Twitter account at Fenton Mediation. Let me share about the promotion for the Practicum. There is another option available for individuals looking to become accredited as a family mediator in Ontario. Ontario Association for Family Mediation, OAFM, is now providing that 80 of the 100 hours of Practicum experience can be completed using simulated cases. The final 20 hours of the Practicum must be completed with real clients. Family Mediation Practicum Ontario is providing, through its OAFM approved course, this experience starting very soon within the next 2 weeks of late September 2021 by using realistic case scenarios with the 80 hours counting towards accreditation. All classes are online with real-time feedback. For more information, you can check out the webpage, familymediationpracticum.pccs.ca. So the conversation tonight is called the Deep Dive into Mediation Series, Part 2, Opening Up for Dialogue. And with me today will be Don Kuhlman. The program is live each Sunday night from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time through Zoom. We will engage in conversation with everyone attending, able to listen and watch. Microphones and webcams will be closed. If anyone wants to contribute, there are two options. One is to see the chat icon as a bubble at the bottom center of your screen for you to click to then type in a comment or question and click to send. Or you can click on the reactions icon that is also on the bottom center of your screen and then click on the hand icon for us to see you want to speak. We will open up your microphone only for you to share your comment or question and then close the microphone once again. The show is being recorded for both video and audio purposes and will be available for public access on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts afterwards. So, as I mentioned, joining me in the other visual that's visible is Don Kuhlman. Welcome back.
Hello,
Don.
Greg.
Hello. How you doing?
Well, I don't know if you follow football, American football, but the Kansas City Chiefs just won, and there is a bar that's like one block down, and they've been yelling and cheering, and thankfully it just stopped. But that's how I knew that we were winning, because I wasn't watching it. I was walking around my office getting stuff ready, but every time I would hear a cheer, I would do a quick Google search, and I was like, and then yeah, we ended up winning. We beat the Cleveland Browns. But anyway, I don't know if your listeners really care about that.
I heard that Patrick Mahomes is actually a follower of Mediation Station.
Oh my goodness, wouldn't that be something?
For everyone else's benefit, that's the quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs. Yeah.
You really surprised me with that just now, Greg. I'm not gonna lie. Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay. Actually, let's see to invite him for the next version of this one.
We should.
Yeah.
So he's usually busy on Sundays, though. You know, he's got this little gig on the side that he does.
Yeah. Well, you said the show. That show was over, so it wouldn't conflict for time with this show. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the bar is close by, right? Like yes. You're in the hood with you.
Well, it's technically a barbecue joint because I'm in Kansas City, Missouri, and we're known for our barbecue. So it's a barbecue brewery just one block away. So, yeah.
Well, okay. That's cool. All right. Very good. Otherwise, everything else is going okay since our last
Everything
visit
else,
together?
everything else is going okay.
All right, you were last here with me on July 25th, and that's when we presented part one of the series, which was about research in the start.
Yeah.
So tonight we're shifting things, moving along with opening up for dialogue. So when I say the word mediation to you, what comes to mind?
Truthfully, I feel like I'm in the midst of a mediation in the workplace, but it's actually what I would call an informal mediation. So, like in my brain, I think of we have formal mediation, which I would put like with the capital M, and which is often what mediation station, like that's what we're talking about in terms of conflict resolution. But then I think also in our own lives and in our work lives, we often do lowercase m, like an informal version of mediation a lot. Does that make sense?
When do those lowercase versions tend to happen?
So I have one going on right now, and it actually happened Friday afternoon, so that's why it's fresh in my brain. But the lowercase one, so as an executive director of a nonprofit, I have a board of directors that I have to continually collaborate with and make happy and fulfill their needs, right? You know, when we think about needs, this is part of what this entity has and what they want. And then I've got my staff, I've got the organization,
Mhm.
I've got what everybody else's needs, my contract mediators. And so here's me, right? Trying to navigate the needs and the wants of this particular group while also fulfilling and navigating the needs and the wants of this group to make everybody happy and to keep this group going. But at the time on Friday, I didn't really see it as a lowercase m. I wanted to just tell everyone what to do.
And how much you define that?
But I held back and I navigated that. But today, after I've had some time to, my brain has had some time to sort of calm down, cool down. I thought this is really just a mediation, Dawn. That's what this is. And so I think you know, in life, I almost feel everyone needs to be trained in mediation. You're always having to negotiate something between people, and whether it's formal, informal, and you at least always have to figure out the needs and the wants and the desires of often many groups of people to figure out ways to not always walk away singing kumbaya, but at least so people feel heard, you know? So, and maybe that's all part of it. It's just when I think of mediation, I think, you know, perspective taking, listening, recognition. Maybe you'll get an outcome, maybe not.
So when you reference that the needs of the hierarchy there, the authority
Yeah,
over you, the
yeah,
board, and then
yeah,
the people who are you're they're responsible to you,
yeah,
accountable to you, because you're accountable to the board.
yeah.
And you talked about their respective needs and interests. What about yours?
Yeah.
What happens? Do you have any?
Yeah. Um, that is blurry too, isn't it? You're trying to always navigate, you know, we could ask these big questions like what is truth? I feel like that's a what is truth question in terms of what what are what are my needs and how am I, well, I don't want to have like multiple levels of conversation here, but obviously I'm imposing mine in all those levels of that conflict too, you know?
Well, I would believe that yours are factored in for you.
Yeah,
You're just not a vacuum that's empty or as a vessel.
absolutely.
You have substance within you as part of how do you process those needs above, and the needs thus are below you in some way, though I don't
No,
believe
but
you
it's the
see them as
structure.
being below.
Yeah, it's a structure of the hierarchy of the
Yeah,
organization.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
it's not at that. I know what you mean. It's just the structure of the organization. Yeah.
yeah. On a hierarchical level, it's
Yeah.
not to say that
No,
they're
no,
beneath you and you're above
no,
them in the
no.
sense of
It's just the way that it's structured and the way my position is. But you
yeah.
know, but that's mediation, right?
Well,
Like
it can
I'm in
be.
between these two entities often, I feel like.
Okay. So in terms of us, the decision has been made for there to be a mediation process. I'm going to lay this out for you.
Okay.
And the people have had their respective individual meetings with the mediator. So they have these private sessions.
Mm-hmm.
There's different terms we use,
Yeah.
case development, intake, whatever
Yep.
it is, pre-mediation meeting.
Yep.
So now it's time to bring them together to some type of session to start talking with each other. In that preparation, there are a few things to consider, i.e. the space, the people, and yourself in relation to all that. What are the things you do to organize the space for people to attend in order to do that?
Do you have Netflix?
Do we get it north of the border?
Do
Yeah,
you
we.
watch it? Do you
No,
have?
I don't. I don't watch it. Sorry,
Okay.
I'm not a very exciting person.
So Marie Kondo, she is this woman who is known for going in and organizing rooms and creating flow. And one of her big questions is, you're supposed to pick up this item, every item in your home, and you ask it, like, and you ask yourself, does this spark joy?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Like,
Okay.
so does this item spark joy in your home? And I feel like we have to do that same question, that same thing with our office. If you're sitting in this gray, drab office that doesn't spark joy, if you aren't sparked with joy in your space, how are other people going to be sparked with joy in that space? You know what I mean? Like, so thinking about just from the very space itself, in terms of, I have literally messages all over I have a dry erase board because we're going to talk about the use of art and other things. And so I've got good things happen to those who go for it. Dream, you've got this. Dream bigger, let it go, love yourself, be kind, a caterpillar and a butterfly. And I'll talk about how I use that in a minute. Um, everything in here, there's sort of these verbal and nonverbal messages that are bombarding people from the moment they come into my office with, you feel safe here, just kind of calming the brain and saying, this is a safe space. This isn't a sterile place where we're just going to talk about some things and then leave. Like, I really try for what I would call a homey feel in my office. I want people to feel at home here. So that's sort of, for me, that's sort of very important. In addition to the simple layout of the conversation space. Silly little things, but when I'm training people to be mediators, I really try to emphasize, if you have two notebooks, you make them the same. You put the pen the same exact way. You give them a bottled water, it goes the same exact space. Like, if there is any perception of inequality or unfairness from the time they come into this space, there's already a conflict. There's already something going on. So giving the perception of equality, if you will, from the time they enter your office to the time they come in here, just feeling like they are on completely even playing field. I feel like all of that is really helpful for getting people to feel safe to open up. The other thing that I really think about in terms of like nonverbals, setting the stage, is what you wear. And
Okay.
I don't
Explain
want,
that. Explain that.
yeah. So I work with a lot of clients who are receiving some sort of state assistance. And so if I were to have on a suit jacket or like a formal suit, and they come in, there could be perceptions of, she doesn't understand me already. So I often wear blue jeans. I'll wear tennis shoes. I wear, like a nice blouse, or I'll wear some sandals, something like that. But just this element of sort of, no one is perceived as smarter, better, or like, we're all connected here in terms of the clothes and even how we talk. Like, I'll throw around some cuss words and stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Because people will come in here and they'll cuss and then they'll apologize. And I'm like, my mom was a bartender for 30 years. I think we're good. Like,
Well, there might be words though that may cross the line. Just say no.
whatever.
All right.
You've never been around my mom.
Oh, no, I mean in the mediation.
Well, obviously, if it's to each other, then yes. But yeah, um, there's, I think any way that people can start to feel comfortable being themselves, whatever that may be, I want to know how I can facilitate that. And then that's sort of how we can start to really start to have people feeling comfortable for conversations.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I really, I understand what you're talking about with in terms of people's attire or clothing and
yeah,
how that communicates something in any type of situation relative to, from my history with community mediation, there used to be some of the mediators who would dress up in to the hilt in some way,
yeah,
and wearing the bling, we'll
yeah,
call it the jewelry, let's just say, and on a community based level, you're trying to remove the barriers, the actual barriers and the perceived barriers that
yes,
people would process,
yeah,
because you want to create conditions that people will feel, quote, as comfortable to be in a space and a process that will elevate or deepen into their uncomfort or discomfort. So if they feel that there's you and them as a mediator in the party, they're not going to necessarily be able to connect.
connect.
So it sounds like you really have to put intention into how you organize and prepare the process, let alone deliver
Yeah,
the process.
yeah.
How do you get into that mindset of the people that you're going to work with?
So, you know, um, one of the things that I was thinking about was people's perception of conflict. And, one of the training exercises I do when I'm training people to be mediators, I always talk about this just because I feel like it ties to everything that I do. But I always create this big continuum on the wall. And I'll have a sign that says conflict is bad. And then I'll have a sign over there that says conflict is good. And I have people line up all along the wall. Like I make people physically get up and people groan. They don't want to get up. They like it in their seats, whatever. But people get up and I go stand by the sign in which you feel like that just resonates with you. Conflict is good, conflict is bad, right? And it's amazing to me, even as people who have been working in this field for sometimes 20 years, who now have decided they're going to be mediators, they'll still go down to the side that says conflict is bad. And I think it takes a lot of, it takes a lot of work to get your brain wrapped around the idea that conflict is good. But I think about the folks who are down there on the conflict is good side have really found ways to embrace it, accept it, navigate conflict, reframe it. They've had a lot of tools to do all of that. I'm not saying these people don't have the tools either, because everyone's got the tools to navigate it. But I think for me, I was down on the conflict is bad side for a long time. I would say probably at least into like the first 10 years of my mediation career, because my frame of reference, just to kind of share, you know, conflict for me growing up meant domestic violence. There wasn't anyone in my home to show me this is how we resolve conflict. We are role models for our children in terms of how we are resolving things. So in my home, if you got into a fight, you just hit somebody like that and you would berate them, you would do whatever. And so in my mind, that's what conflict was. Um, and I think in my heart, like a lot of people, if you ask them about this continuum, a lot of people just say conflict is bad. Like a lot of folks don't have experiences where they were able to use the conflict for constructive or to reframe it or if they did, it's just hard to remember those experiences. And so when folks are coming in, I often think of this continuum and I'm just going to kind of guess on where they're at. And then if they, it's, I hate to say it, but it is sort of a presumption that I make in terms of just where I think people are. But until they can show me that conflict is good and they can navigate it, I just sort of operate under the assumption that I've got to kind of coach and lead and show how conflict can be good and conflict can be safe and conflict can be constructive in this process. And that, I think, is just kind of a good baseline for me.
Well, I think it's on the principle that you as a mediator are not expecting the people to become like you.
Yeah,
It's more you have to adapt to the people where they're at to
that's
see
true.
how best to guide them and sort of help shine a light so that they can see possibility from impasse, negativity. And so that's where the big picture of how conflict can be good,
Yeah.
it's a process to get to that point.
I mean, there have been times over my career where people have asked me for a trash can because they wanted to throw up in it. They felt so sick by just sitting in the same room with this person. Gentleman came in, he had taken, oh, I'm not kidding, about 3 or 4 Valium before. I'd never, it's funny but not funny, seen a person pass out with their eyes open. His eyes were open. And I was like, is he okay? And she's like, I don't know. Anyway, we had to call his parents. It was, but the great lengths in which people will try to escape, or like I've had people run out of my office before, literally run out. When you think about the flight, freeze mechanisms, all of those are going when it comes to mediation sometimes. And so just always trying to think about ways, and again, these are just things that happen over the years, and you just sort of learn like, oh my gosh, I knew that conflict was hard, but for this person, conflict means this. And it's one of those subjective experiences that everybody's got their own definition, their own history, their own perspective of what conflict means for them.
Yeah, I mean, that's how they found a way to cope. I mean, this
Yeah.
guy was medicating themselves
Yep.
to process their lived moments, experiences. And it might not just be a general practice, it might be more connected to the person
Yeah.
in which they're going to be facilitated with that process that they've experienced all this negativity and difficulty with. And so, in anticipation of being in the same room with this person, to be compelled in some way to have a conversation, they can't stand the person, or everything's been negative to that point. And
Yeah.
now, yeah, that people find different ways to cope.
Healthy and unhealthy ways. Yes.
So how do you prepare yourself to be in a room with two people or more
Yeah.
who can't be uh who can't stand each other, let's just say, simply?
So, one of the things that I feel like I'm going to talk about left brain, right brain prep. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right brain prep, this is the nonverbal, I'm not going to call it emotional, but, just feeling like I need to calm my system down and, like I said, create the space that's good. And so doing some deep breathing. And then the left side of my brain, obviously I'm reading through the chart, I'm gathering as much information as I can, I'm trying to learn all that I can about these people. And some people have different ideas about how much information should you gather about a case before you meet with the people, because you don't want to have a ton of preconceived ideas. But in the same sense, I don't like completely going in blind, and so we do gather a certain amount of data. And so just reading through that and making sure that you know how we're getting ready to meet. And I guess part of that we're not even really, that my brain's not really even thinking about at this point, is I've been talking about a lot of in-person But, as you know, I mean, we're doing all methods of mediation right now, and, just navigating all of that as we go.
So how much value do you put on that disclosure, we'll call it, in advance that, it tends to come through a more legalistic approach of mediation?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I'll talk out of both sides of my mouth. As we've talked about before, people, we have a scale, and they will rate the scale on what they think, how the conversation is going to go, or, and they're like, oh, a 1 or a 2, we're not going to solve anything. And then they end up leaving and they resolve it. So on the one hand, I don't, it is what it is. But on the other hand, if it's like violence or a history of anything, then obviously I take that more seriously.
Okay. So
So
is it part of your practice too, that you do an intake or that separate meeting in advance, confidential, etc.?
it depends. I actually have a case tomorrow. I'm going to do an intake with them separately, just at different times, and then we're going to have our joint session next week. But then other days, well, you just jump in cold and figure it out as we go.
Okay.
And the court is actually part of who decides that for me. We've back in 2016, our court did a pilot project, and we called it transformative mediation, but truthfully, we could have called it anything. But it was just sort of this idea that we're going to meet with these people in advance and see how it goes. And it went really well. We were
And
surprised.
and the court is a family court,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And
Yep.
the people tomorrow, it's a family related matter.
Yes.
Okay.
Good
Just
detail. Thank you.
just to give context for the
Yes.
benefit of the viewers, listeners, etc.
See, that was me talking about my perspective, right? Like I just assumed everybody knew what I was talking about.
Well,
That's my life.
well, everything, there's a lot of things going on. You mentioned earlier about how people have this perception of their reality that when you say the word conflict, it's all negative. And when you have them go on that continuum,
Yeah.
and most tend to go to the is it the left side where
Conflict.
that's the negative piece?
I switched it around when I talked to you about it, but yeah, it just depends. The conflict is bad side. I usually put that on the left, but yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned that for the first 10 years of and then it sounds like something changed. What was that point of change? What happened for you to get that light bulb moment, we'll say?
Speaking of transformative mediation, I think the word is empowerment, where I didn't feel, this is going to sound weird, I guess. This is a good question, Greg. Just so you know, Greg's going off script right now.
What script? This is not scripted. We never have a script. We have a template.
Somehow, I feel like this is my therapy session.
Don't worry. I want to present it to you. It's all confidential.
So I think I used to think, I don't want to say I was a victim, or I don't really think I felt like I had control over the process per se. And I think as a mediator, that's your job, is to have control over the process. That's what you're there for. But when you are afraid of conflict, and you're afraid of people in conflict, and and you don't know how to handle people who are having these intense emotions, it can be scary. And I was 27 years old when I first started doing this, and I didn't know much about much. And and I've got people who are sometimes, twice my age, fighting about their kids. And I didn't even have kids at the time. So, it's just one of these elements of where you don't have much knowledge, you don't have much skill. The perception that you had was, your youth was not the best in terms of showing you how to navigate this terrain. And so it was all pretty overwhelming. And then, just as you grow and you have kids and you become more comfortable in conflict, and I learned how to navigate these strong emotions that people were having, and I learned how to calm my brain down so I could stay engaged in the process. You do start to feel more confident. That's for sure.
Well, I think you'd have to have the mindset that there's more to learn.
There's always
that
more
whole
to learn.
concept of openness.
Yeah.
instead of just going in thinking that one knows everything that one needs to know and there's nothing new to know, and I'll just do what I know, relative to not being receptive and responsive to the people that you're working to assist, to adapt yourself and help them adapt to you
Yeah.
in a fluid way where you can both find some medium that you'll connect with.
And
Yeah.
just and confidence, just feeling, when you first start doing mediation, it just takes time to find your role and navigate it. And all of that just takes time for everyone. One of the things I think you and I, Greg, had talked before, when you first start doing your opening monologue, you're sort of reading through the sheet of paper. At least I was.
Like a script.
Yes, today, this is what mediation is. And it's a confidential process. And you're sort of holding this sheet of paper. And I probably did that for like the first 3 or 4 months when I first started. And, you just like any other thing, you've got to learn it and feel confident in it. And,
So what made you change from that, doing that as a practice?
oh, well, just now I can do my opening monologue for you right here. It'd put you to sleep, but
No, it's
you just begin to memorize it and feel it, and and the content, the concepts, why they are a certain way. You begin to understand the why of what the opening is. Just a lot of growth in that.
well, I mean, yeah, for one thing, it's you learning how to organize yourself, to organize the people. So that's part of the process, to present some kind of introduction that spells out in some way, what the process is going to be, the confidentiality, it's voluntary. You're not a lawyer, you're not giving legal advice,
Mhm.
those kinds
Yeah,
of things.
yeah,
And at the same time, you want to get that incorporated within your mindset. And then over time, it became more natural and fluid for you.
yeah. And you have to have fun with it. And so tying this into the opening up for dialogue,
Yeah.
the opening monologue is sort of, we've got the nonverbals, we've got all these messages in terms of the room and helping people feel safe and secure for opening up. But your opening monologue is really like your first conversation, if you will, with these people, even though you're kind of talking at them, but you can still make it feel like a dialogue in the sense of, like, I will incorporate some humor in mine. Take this for what you will. But when I say it's confidential, I'll say what we say in here stays in here. It's like Vegas, baby. You just and people can remember stuff like that, but if I just sat there and talked to them about the facts of it all, and it would be hard, I think, for people to relate to that. And so people laugh, and I think that kind of loosens them up. And I'll talk a little bit about, Mike, you weave in your credibility on, like, your history, and without saying, I've got my degree from here and I've been doing this for this long. And you just sort of weave all of that in a natural way that helps.
Yeah. I mean, you bring genuine,
Yeah.
you bring some humanity. You're not just this machine. You're there as a human being with feelings too.
Yeah.
So I think it's important for us to present ourselves and our humanity, to incorporate that into the process so that people will feel somewhat more relaxed in some way, even though these can be really challenging matters that they're seeking to get, the ways to make decisions, because the decisions in the process, especially about family matters, will be profound for a lifelong type of experience per se. And so you want to present that you're not just going through the motions, that you're actually connected to what you're sharing and helping to inform and possibly educate the people you're with.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people have never done this process. And so it's really the first time that even though in theory, our process state, I mean, we send them a letter of what it is and everything in advance, but until they actually sit down and you walk them through what this is supposed to look like, people don't know. They, it's like a secret underground
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. I mean, people create this image of what it would be, and how they create that image could be presented from other tangibles, i.e., television or
Yeah,
movies, what it's supposed to be like and what it will be like. And then when it actually is happening, the reality check happens. And so we have to be there, I believe, in a supportive way and help them journey through and into and through that. And, I really relate to the humor piece.
yeah,
I like to inject humor too.
yeah. Well, and because they come in and they're so nervous, and everybody, I always envision like two people in their armored suits when they first sit down, you know, no vulnerability. I'm here to protect and defend myself. And so when I'm start, not being overly funny and minimizing the process, but just interjecting something in there to sort of lighten it up, it can help.
Do you tend to focus the humor on you as the person, the focus?
Sometimes yeah, or just random things. And you want to know something funny? Um, I have a dog. Her name is Bo, baby Bo. And I will ask them if they're allergic to like dogs, and people love dogs. And so like they will let my dog like sit on their lap and she'll jump up there. It really helps people as well. I've noticed that she helps people really calm down, or they'll be like, oh my gosh, I've got four dogs. Again, looking for these moments of connection where I'm not just this person, trying to talk to you. I'm a real person too. And so then like people will start telling me about their lives. And so we have they're small talk, but it's still these moments of connection that I really appreciate.
That is can be really profound, because that can take the temperature
Yeah.
from this high elevated level intensity
Yeah.
that can be more comforting for people. I mean, that's why we use animals to go to seniors homes and care homes and hospitals to help shift some of the temperature and the culture.
Yeah.
And bringing an animal into the process is totally cool.
She's Bo, the office dog.
Or the mediator mud.
Mediator mutt. We're gonna get her a little name tag.
Get a shirt,
A little
get a
mediator
t-shirt,
mutt.
put it on the back of the shirt and have the dog, and
Oh,
randomly, so you have two people in high tension in the room, and then you sort of create this template where the dog just comes in wearing this shirt, and then the people will notice. I'm sure it will change the energy in the room.
I'm sure it would change the energy too. Although this is horrible. I'm like, I hope she's not like my baby dog. I'm like, I hope she's not being traumatized sometimes by the amount of conflict that I think she's being exposed to.
Well, we talk about vicarious trauma too, right? With trauma informed and trauma experience. So make sure your dog has the therapy
My
and the
therapy
counseling.
dog needs a therapy dog, is basically what that comes down to.
I remember, and I've spoken about this on other shows, where I had a case in community mediation days where it was a neighbor conflict. And on one side were an elderly couple who had a dog, and on the other is a developmentally challenged individual. He's about 22 at the time, though he had the intellectual capacity of maybe an 8-year-old.
Mm,
And so, he wasn't sophisticated to what his age would state in some context he should
yeah,
be.
yeah,
And so what happened was that he attached himself with this dog next door. And he was so prone to looking for that attention with it. And it ended up causing some grief for the older couple, because the dog would get excited and they couldn't control the dog. And this
mm,
guy next door would sort of provoke the dog. So created an opportunity where they had a process and came to the office, and we worked under a co-mediation model, two mediators.
yeah.
And so at the beginning, the older couple, the lady asked permission to have the dog, a picture, a photo of the dog to put on the table. Because that's the essence of what the process was really focusing on. The situation involving the dog, who technically couldn't speak for itself, at least in a comprehensible way. So the dogs was on the table, and that provided some sense of humanizing, even though the dog is not human, though it's a sentient being.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a real thing we're talking about here. Yeah. And I did that for a handful I go through phases with things, but I used to have people bring a picture of their child, and I still might have, even when I'm doing it by Zoom and we've been talking about a particular child for, like 30 or 4 minutes. I'm like, can somebody show me a picture of this kid? And then they have their phone and they'll show me sometimes or whatever. And you're right. It's this human element that we've been talking about this whole time.
So in some way, I would call that, quote, a prop, let's just say.
Mhm. Yeah.
Do you have some props that you incorporate as part of props, PROPS, that you incorporate in?
Props.
Do you have anything handy that you can?
So, some basic props. I do a lot of reading from books, and, just like something small that can be relevant. I think, just to kind of back this up for a minute, it's one thing for us to just sort of sit and talk with people or try to convey a message through words, like direct words. But I think people really learn best by visuals, pictures, illustrations of things, metaphors. Metaphors are huge. One of my colleagues does a training on the use of metaphors in mediation. Anything that can convey a message without directly saying it, I think, is very powerful in the mediation process. So one of the things, this is a snow globe.
Yeah.
And I use the snow globe to illustrate the brain when it gets angry or triggered. So do you see all the snow, how it all shakes up?
Mm-hmm.
That's the brain when it's angry, if you will, meaning that we can say and do a lot of damage to relationships and to ourselves during that 20 minutes that it takes for the snow globe to sort of calm back down. And thinking about, these are just conversations about emotion regulation, but it's just, people get it. They're like, yeah, like, they can really think about their brain and what it's like, and how that time, sometimes they say 20 to 60 minutes for a brain to calm down. But people like that one. Another one that I use is, I'm acting like Greg, I'm getting close to the screen. That's an inside joke, but anyway. Laura's laughing.
It's okay. It's all transparent here.
I use this to illustrate the brain. And this is just real fast. I'll talk to people about neural networking, which sounds like a really big, scary topic. But when I talk to people about, and I show them, so like this would be a neural network, thinking about just the path. And I talk to people about meditation and rewiring their brain and changing behaviors. Anyway, simple pieces of paper. People get it. Another thing that I do a lot is I use continuums. This says past, present, and future.
I like the word continuum.
I use continuums for everything. And I'll talk a little bit about how I use that in a minute. I feel like I'm showing a lot of things, but whiteboard, even now in Zoom, you can still show things in Zoom to illustrate things. I used to have, I think he's at my house. He's the Incredible Hawk, and he's like this little character. And so when people get mad, we'll talk about like the hawk and the body changes and stuff. And sometimes I do this in caucus because, but sometimes I'll do it together. There's really no method to the madness, if you will.
So how do you decide, quote, what prop to use? And
Yeah.
second to that, when to use it?
the time dictates itself. And I'll give you an example. I just had a case like this last week, and that's why it's fresh on my mind. But often when parents are in a conflict, they unfortunately operate from what I call a deficit-based model, meaning that they like to sit across from each other and literally tell me or tell each other, I don't know who they're telling, that all of the horrible things that this person has done. Literally, like they'll just want to use the time to say, well, you do this and you don't do this and you don't do this and you do this. And it can be pretty exhausting. And so thinking about how we reframe from that deficit based model, right? Because, and I'll say something along the lines of, well, if I had to, if your kiddo was here, I would want your kiddo to know the strengths of you. Like what what are the amazing things that you guys can do? How are you raising this kiddo? What strengths do you have to raise this kiddo to the best of your ability? You know what I mean? Like how can we frame this away in a way that's not deficit based, blame based, arguing based, and filled with all these expectations and shoulds. That's another.
And
I use
yeah, and a
yeah.
lot of negativity.
Yes. Yeah. So I have this book, Rob Bell. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Rob Bell. I absolutely love him and adore him. He is actually a Christian-based reader, but he's more philosophical than anything. And I just actually listened to one of his podcast interviews today, but he loves to frame things in a way that I would call that's inspirational or motivational. And so that's probably one of my favorite things about his work. And like he's come to Kansas City twice. He does some live speaking events, and my husband had no idea who he was. And my husband's sort of a stoic faced guy. And so we go to
Can
this.
he hear you right now?
No, he can't, but
Okay.
he would not be surprised by that. Because that's how opposites meet, right? Like that's how that works. But I have enough personality for both of us. And so I take my husband to this theater to go see Rob Bell, and my husband's like in tears. Like he is so moved by this guy. And so then when Rob Bell came back like 2 years ago, I was like, hey, I've got tickets. We're gonna go see Rob Bell. He's like, okay. Like, I'm cool. That's good. All right, we'll go see Rob Bell. Like I'm down with that. Well,
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
so Rob Bell's got in this book on how to be here, he's got this section and it's titled Who You Aren't Isn't Interesting. Okay.
Okay.
So when you're thinking about this deficit based model, it's all about who you aren't.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's like, you have a list of all the things you aren't, the things you can't do, the things you've tried that didn't go well, regrets, mistakes that haunt you, moments when you crawled home in humiliation. For many of us, this is the source of a number of head games, usually involving the words not blank enough. And he talks about smart enough, talented, disciplined, educated, beautiful. You fill in the blank. They are, and he's like, here's the truth about those messages. They aren't interesting. What you haven't done, where you didn't go to school, what you haven't accomplished, who you don't know, what you're scared of, all of these things simply aren't interesting. And so in so many words, I read this and I'll say, okay, you guys may not be all, aren't, you're not all these things, but if I am going to work with you today, and if we're going to work on this strength-based model of like figuring out what you can do, I need to know what you're good at, right? Like you've got to frame this situation in a way of, if we want the kids to get the best of you, I want the best of you. I need to figure out what you can do, what you're good at. How is this kid going to thrive by the skills, actions, thoughts, behaviors, everything else that you're bringing to the table today? I can work with that. I can't.
Mhm.
I can't work with what you're not bringing me.
Well, I mean, it's an opportunity to build upon,
Yes.
right? Whereas the deficit is like you're digging a hole deeper
Yeah.
and it's not building. It's
No.
going in the opposite direction of what ideally is best.
Do I think it's helpful to know people's weaknesses? Like, oh, you're always late, so maybe we should do the exchange here. Yes, obviously. Those are different than like just this deficit based conflict stuff that often happens in front of me. So,
To interject, I shifted from that whole negativity of even the word weakness.
yeah,
Maybe, neutralize it to a word
something to
of
work around.
challenge,
Yeah,
challenge with.
yeah,
Okay, how would you see this as an opportunity? Build upon, inject the positivity in there as
yeah,
much as possible to shift that whole thing from helplessness, hopelessness,
yeah,
and perceiving and seeing and making sense of the other person from the extreme of it'll never work. And so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy here. You're just reinforcing this. And what's the point of doing this process? So you got to shift and create a new tone and culture within there.
yeah, absolutely. I love it. But I think, and it just, these opportunities just present themselves. And I hate to say it, but I do sort of have like 10 props, if you will, that I constantly use because there's a lot of the same things that I see over and over in terms of the people that I work with. Um,
Yeah, there's
but it's,
consistencies with people.
yeah. And so, and just doing visualizations with people. I once had a dude, maybe this would be a discussion for part 3, post mediation, um, things that we do post mediation. I don't quite, anyway, we'll get to that maybe later, but
We can just plant the seed here as a teaser.
that's a teaser. So, people leave your office and mediation is just this extremely interesting thing because you have 2 hours of, at least I do, 2 hours of intense intimacy and then they pay you and they're gone. Like, that's it, right? Unless they call you again. And that's a different story. But sometimes people will call me because maybe I did something in mediation and they were like, hey, can you do that again with me? Or hey, I just want your thoughts on this, or how can I cope with this person? Anyway, sometimes people just keep showing up and we need to figure out what to do with all of that. I think as mediators sometimes. But so this guy, he was a client, a mediation guy, and he calls me up and he's the mom has really made him upset, and he actually drives dirt trucks, like he moves dirt for a living. And so he's on his little Bluetooth and he's working and he's so mad about mom. And so, I think it's fun to play on your audience, if you will, in terms of figuring out what people can relate to. And so for him, I used a gas gauge. And I was like, if the gas gauge is too high, I was like, you got to visualize this gas gauge and go back to like the gas gauge is center. When you're too low, it means you're not engaged enough. And because he likes to go to the other side a lot and lose his mind a little bit.
The
And so he's
extreme.
like,
Yeah.
he's like, I like that gas gauge, Don. I'm going to use that, And then I had another guy, mom would not reply back fast enough to his text messages. That was his thing. Well, through the conversation, I learned that he loved to fish. And I said, wait a minute, you have the patience to fish? You can throw a line out there and you can wait for half an hour, whatever to catch. I said, but you're mad because she's not. And he goes, I've never thought about that. And I go, act like when you text her, like you've just casted the line and now you're just waiting and you've got to wait for as long as it takes to catch that fish. And he's like, I really like that. I mean, so you just have to continually listen and think about these metaphors that people can relate to. So they can sort of have these aha light bulb moments on how to make their situation better.
Yeah. It's like, the active listening. You're hearing what's being said to then process what's not being said. Though, so that's the what. You got to figure out how to help a person connect with that idea, concept, with the how.
Yeah.
And so you give that symbolism and some more than the metaphor to help them in their way. You adapt yourself in the process to them where they're at.
Yeah, exactly. You have to speak a language that they understand. And that's where all of these, I think, props and ideas and if the first one doesn't work, then you pull out another one and you try it and
So
constantly.
if I put this in front of you, which I haven't done yet, what would this mean to you? It's got a little tape on it because it's aged from my community mediation days. And
It scares me.
there are arms here, and the hand is gone, and the arm and the hand from the other side is gone. So if you like press the back, it's supposed to go up. So I had this as a prop for a number of cases. I put it on the table, and then it would just sit there. I'd leave it intentionally on view for the parties. And then at some point, people would say, well, what's that? What's all that about? And then, oh, this. So I use it again, it connects with the humor piece and the tension to change the temperature in the room. And so
Yeah.
I click it like this, and the fist would go up. Well, that in a way represents a lot of the situations and people that come into conflict in a negative way.
So one of the things I was thinking about when you said that in terms of like deflecting, or I always call them rabbit holes. And like when we are entrenched, I don't want to say an impasse because there's still a lot of negative going. There's still energy there,
Yeah.
but it's a dead end road energy. So I don't know. Maybe it is impasse. I don't know how to navigate that, but it's just dead end energy, but it keeps going and keeps going. And so I'll say, whoa, let's think about let's come out of these rabbit holes. And I'll do these visuals of like us coming out of a rabbit hole. And then I feel like that's when I feel like those tools are really good and thinking about because their brain is entrenched in something. And the only way you're going to get them off of that is by connecting their brain to something else. Otherwise,
Yeah. Taking them out of that mindset of like, again, the negativity and it won't work. And
yeah,
when they keep restating the same thing,
same thing.
something's not tapped into yet. I think that's a cue for us to
Yeah.
be exploring, to tap into. So I heard you repeat this a number
Yeah.
of times.
And so,
What
yeah,
does
we're
that
gonna
mean?
check
What's
out,
going on for you? And then use some technique.
go someplace else.
Yeah.
Let's try to approach it from this over here since we know this way isn't working. Yeah.
Yeah. Just keep connected. And the self-awareness piece and the reflection piece is so important to have that walking along with people in their
Yeah.
journey to find a way that will be responsive, not reactive, because they've already conditioned themselves with the reactive thing and it's entrenched in a negative
Oh,
whole mindset.
yeah. That was actually an activity that I did with some folks once. I've done it more than once, but this particular time I've got a fun story with it. So I do a lot of mindfulness stuff in my sessions. And so in mindfulness, there's what's called automatic negative thoughts. And so part of mindfulness is just being mindful of your automatic negative thoughts, which they call ants, ANTS. And so I pull out this list because if you Google automatic negative thoughts, you'll find a whole list of them, like it's black or white thinking, assuming the other person's negative, just all these lists of automatic negative thoughts. And so I go through my list with them because I can hear them doing it throughout the session, but I just want to kind of make a mindfulness with them on it. And then I said, so, can you recognize some ants, some automatic negative thoughts that you have? And this gal, she was like, girl, I've got a whole ant farm going on up here. And I was like, well, this is good to know, right? Like this is an insight. Like she's very at least aware of these negative thoughts. And that's mindfulness, right? Like that's the first step, is having just this awareness of these thoughts are keeping us entrenched in this conflict. And so then him figuring out her figuring out hers. And then when they at least are mindful of that, they're having these thoughts, how can I then begin to look at this situation differently? And I think that's the fun. That's the fun part of mediation. That's the fun stuff. Just changing it up, trying
Yeah.
something new.
And
It's scary.
you talked earlier too about a different using paper
Yeah.
or the moving only from words as
Yeah.
a form of expression of how are you feeling. give people a piece of paper and a pen or colors and say, okay, if you can't find the words, that's fine.
Yep.
How about drawing us something of what you're feeling, and even drawing something of what you ideally want this to look like?
I draw, this is a little bit of my humor that I interject, but so when I was in grad school, feel free to make fun of me, but that's why you go to grad school, so you can learn stuff,
I
right?
just want you to know it's a non-judgmental space
That's
here.
right. That's right. So there's like a hierarchy. So, I was raised by a single mom. I was a bartender. You already know that part. So it was just me and my mom most of my life. And true story, my mom would say, I don't know who's the kid sometimes. Like that tells you the hierarchy in my house. So when I was in grad school, I was like totally blown away. You're going to laugh. So you can't hardly, this is a mom, it's a dad, and it's a child, right? Like
Right. Okay.
this is a fundamental hierarchy for a family. I was in grad school when I saw this and it was like, this makes a ton of sense to me on like why my childhood was so crazy. And sometimes I was up here and my mom was down here. Like it was a little all over the place for me growing up. So when I draw this on my whiteboard in terms of like some possible goals, because the structure can still be this way, even if the family is not intact, right? Like mom and dad can still be making decisions, leadership, everything up at the top, even though the parents are divorced, right? Like those are just some fundamental things. And so I'll draw that and then I'll say, tell me how to draw what your dynamic is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or based upon what I've heard, this is how I would draw your dynamic. And then you say, and then you ask questions like, how do we get to this? What would this feel like? What are the challenges of getting to that? How would we overcome those challenges? How would the kids respond to this? So you have these two pictures and you're creating this path for them all along this way. But I'll go, hey, don't feel bad. I'm like, my parents had to pay $60,000 to learn that, and you're getting it for 400.
Absolutely.
Laugh, you know what I mean? Like, but it's not a joke. But anyway,
if only you got that 60,000, that'd be another story. It's creating mechanisms that will help connect with the people where they're at.
Mhm.
And we talked about this for the first time, the client-centric approach to adapt the process to where people are at, rather than getting people to fit into the box of the mediator and the construct of the process. Make the process adaptable to the people.
Yeah. Well, and I think you do have to, like we've talked about, you're setting the stage for listening, you're setting the stage for connection. You've got to find ways to keep them engaged in the process. That's part of opening up. Is I once had a gentleman, I'm not kidding, he took his chair and he scooted all the way to the corner of the room and sat by himself while we were at the table.
What was your understanding of why you did that?
You know, at the time, it was probably about 10 years ago. I was just like, would you, what would help you feel comfortable to join us at the table? Or I can't remember, it was something along those lines. Because that's the thing, you always, again, taking that client centered approach. What are they needing? What are they wanting? How can we fulfill that need in order to get them to be part of this process? Um, and I think he just didn't trust her or didn't like her. And so I think we ended up just reconfiguring the chairs and that ended up bringing him at the table. But, again, if that's what it's going to take to open it up for dialogue, then sometimes we have to rearrange chairs or we've got to ask questions and we've got to dive in to figure out what they need just to help them start it.
So let's touch on that. I mean, we're closing soonish, very soon, and
Yep.
I just put it out there. If anybody wants to ask a question or make a comment, please feel free to do so. How do you prepare the room, like the space, the seating, who sits where, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's it's a really tricky thing for my office because My literal office is a multi-use space. So I actually have I have my desk in like one portion of the room. We have a conference table because it's where our work team meetings are. Um, ideally I would love to have like a round table. They say those are the best to
Mhm.
facilitate conversations. But instead, it often is just me at the end of the table, of a conference table, and then the two parties right pretty
On the
much there.
sides, on the
Yeah.
sides,
Yeah.
they're facing each other.
Facing each other. Um, and then if there's attorney assisted, then there's attorneys on the other side. And then if there's a guardian ad litem there, then the guardian ad litem sits at the very end of the table.
Just
Typically,
clarify what that last person is.
the guardian ad litem is the attorney for the children.
Okay.
And so for a lot of cases that I've got, if there is a guardian ad litem or what's called a GAL on the case, they will typically be in the mediation with me, which can be good and bad. That's a whole other conversation in terms of their impact, I think, on the ability for folks to open up. Um, but, or, if we're actually using the process the way that it should be used, but that's a conversation for another day.
Who comes into the room first?
They typically both come in together. I typically have them wait out together in the lobby there's usually a staff person out there, who's answering phones and stuff, but can watch. But if people obviously don't feel safe, then we've got staggered arrival and departure and
Right. Yeah.
people in separate rooms and all of
And
that.
then do you intentionally seat them in their chairs, or do you have it pre-planned which chair they're going to sit in?
Nope. They'll see that the notebooks and stuff are set up. And so they'll just go from there. Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of fun to dissect that.
Yeah. I mean, if we're dealing with multi-party too, I mean, two parties, you can sort of, when you have multiple parties, then it becomes a little more complicated, a little more sophisticated, and you have to have, from my experience, much more strategy in terms of organizing the space and the people within that and the seating and how to construct that. Because, as you said at the beginning, you want to
Mhm.
present the sense of equity in the room, equality of some form.
So I will confess of a rookie move I made about 5 years ago. And the attorneys ended up sitting closest to me.
What's the problem with that?
The parties were the furthest away from me. It's supposed to be their process.
Yeah, but ask the lawyers what they think. No, I got to be here to monitor, filter the conversation.
Literally, all the attorneys did was fight with each other and then talk to me. And then the parties were down the other end of the table fighting with each other. It was absolutely,
Right.
it's almost embarrassing for me to tell you about.
No, I
But
mean, yeah, go ahead. You finish.
I learned I will never seat anyone in my office like that again. And in fact, after that, I started to take a little bit more of a harder stance on whether or not attorney assistant was actually helpful. And so I used to do my opening monologue, and I used to say that the attorneys couldn't talk unless they were going to contribute to the mediation process in a helpful way.
And what if there was only one attorney and one lawyer in the room?
We typically try not to do that. Yeah, it's too heavy weighted. Yeah.
Yeah, with the power dynamics. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember supervising at small claims court here with civil matters, and the students from a university a program, they would get cases that would refer on the day of trial, and then the judge would refer them to mediation. And then we go into this room, and I did my best to organize them, the students, coach them in advance of the organizing the process, so that when the parties came in, and if they had counsel, that it was important that the parties, because as you say, this is to be centered through them.
Yeah.
So that lawyers tend to, from my experience, tend to gravitate where they perceive power.
Yeah.
And so if they see you as the mediator, they're going to go closest and position themselves, seat themselves there. So we have to change that paradigm where we intentionally walk the party to the chair that is closest to the mediator, so that situation that you experienced
Yeah.
would be prevented in some way.
Oh, it was horrible. It was hands down one of the worst mediations I've had. But I learned, right? That's the
Well, yeah, it's to take whatever the challenge was and reframe it into something that can be some more positive and productive and
that's right.
to grow and develop with. Yeah.
Yep,
So, well, time goes by when we're having fun.
it does.
Yeah. So we could stay here all night, maybe. What do you think Laura would say?
She's laughing.
Is that what that means? That little
Little smiley face.
oh, that one. Okay. I really can't tell because I'm oh, there we go. Now it's got like a different
Now it's like your scream face.
yeah, like it looks like for Halloween or something.
It says yes.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to close out. What are your thoughts at this point with where we're at to where we could go next?
I think it would be fun to, so we've talked about the beginning, like the start of mediation. Today we kind of talked about, opening up in terms of like props. I don't know. Part of me thinks we should talk about like post mediation, almost like what the reflective part, in terms of growth for the mediator, and then maybe even growth for the parties.
What about the thought of how to, when people come to the point of trying to create their actual decisions, the decision making, let's just say it's pulled up before the post process, getting people to make those decisions, to make the commitment, to feel they can trust them. I think that would be an important piece to unpack.
That would be. That's a big one. I think of like psychology with that a little bit in terms of, it's part of what helps people feel good about a decision.
Or even to make the decision, to be open to say, okay, all right, I agree with you. That other person, they can't, when they walked into the room, they could stand in some way. And now we can be on the same page to some extent.
Yeah. Like, what do you need?
Yeah. For yourself, what do you need from the other person? What can the mediator provide for? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Well, yeah. The other thing I was thinking about too is just people don't know how to negotiate, really. I feel like I constantly have to coach on, they've made a proposal, now you can make a counter proposal. But prior to mediation, I don't think that, at least here, and we as a society do a very good job of teaching negotiation skills. Sort of my way or the highway.
Yeah, the positional,
Yeah.
the adversarial thing. Well, that's all I know. So that's what I'm going to ask for.
Yeah.
It's to go deeper to what you perceive to be or understand or believe to be, to actually realize there's much more potential possibilities, more options.
Yeah. Your interest base. And again, that's where we need to listen to what's important to them. Yeah. Anyway, those are some ideas.
And be creative with all that too.
Yes.
Just because we've done it this way in the past doesn't mean we have to maintain that kind of thinking and decision making the same way. We can reformat it.
Change is scary.
It can be.
Yeah. Even if, yeah. Yep.
All right. So I think we have some basis for next time. So we'll have to have our off-camera
conversation
to help build on this.
Sounds good.
All right. So are you going to let Patrick Mahomes know that we talked about him tonight?
I'm going to invite him, see if he comes next time.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Yeah. Looking for more exposure here. Okay.
Oh, shoot.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. And so you're an hour earlier, so you're 8:14, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Appreciate it. We'll see you soonish.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everyone. And tune in next week again for another different conversation. Have a good night.
Good night.